And welcome back to the ITAM Kitchen. You know, it's the place where we have open collaboration about topics that impact our world in many different forms. And today we're continuing on the topic about ITAM versus CMDB. And yesterday, if you didn't see it, you need to go see the replay. It's out there, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube. We had a phenomenal chat yesterday. Actually, it was more than chat. We had open discussion about it and people online, etc. And we were having so much fun. It's like, we need to continue, and we knew we were out of time. So we were trying to conserve your time, be conscious that we were within an hour constraint. We did our best to stay within there and continue on today. So appreciate everyone joining today. Put in the chat where you're coming in from. Look forward to hearing from you on that side. And let's continue the dialogue. Because yesterday we were talking about a lot of the problems and how we got to where we are as far as a little bit of the history of asset management and CMDB, and how, I'll say, the alignment had to start working together and how we evolved. And it came from two different focuses. Nobody was wrong. We were actually all right, but we didn't talk about collectively together before some of the standards came out. Okay, let's figure this out. I know this has never happened before in the world for anything. So, yeah, right, ever. But today we're going to talk about how we're going to bring it together. How do we solve the problem that we're having? How do we work through some, I'll use the word misalignment, and I'm going to say that constructively, that we have to make sure that we're all on the same page, right? And appreciate everybody putting in their chats in there, for whether it's from Michigan or Vermont. We got everybody from the north today. I know I'm in Tennessee. We've got, Deanna, you're down in Houston, right?
Yes, I am.
And down in Houston, you got Patrick and Charlotte, you got Jeremy in Cincinnati. I mean, we're from all over. So
good beer and weird chili.
It's cold everywhere.
I didn't say it.
I'm a transplant, so I do get to say that.
Okay, there you go. But to start off the topic for this alignment, how do we start? I mean, whenever I start, I think about just having the stakeholder discussion. That's how I start, but that's just my interpretation and how I approach it. Any other thoughts?
Well, I'm a data guy. So you want to start to solve this, you've got to look at the data, and treating the asset and the CI record. We use this analogy a lot. They're the two sides of the same coin. The asset record is telling you what the physical thing is, but it doesn't. And those details that are there as part of the asset record are the immutable stuff. Servers don't suddenly generate a new CPU socket. The memory just doesn't all of a sudden come in out of nowhere, and you can't buy a piece of hardware twice. So that stuff can get locked in. On the CI side, that's about the relationships, and what I really like about the modern CMDBs is that the information captured on the CI is really just pointers and relations back over to other tables, and more importantly, your source data for the stuff that can change, like who's logging in now, what project is this part of, what service is this part of, what chargeback is this part of. So getting that first, solving that first, I think is critical.
Okay, excellent. So to contribute?
One of the other areas is that even though we're just talking about the asset table and the CMDB table, the asset table is a semi-misnomenclature, because once you put it in the asset table, it then goes to the server table, the storage table, the laptop table, and then every single one of these as CIs in relationship has a different configuration module, even though the CMDB seems to be one, and the asset tables are broken up into their different areas. So
also depends upon which environment and what type of technology you're doing.
Exactly. So even when we step into environment, there are so many nuances and differences that we cannot come in saying it's going to be done this way.
I'm sorry, Deanna.
Go ahead. No, we're done.
No, I was going to say, I think that we need to really sit down and talk about what the organization wants and needs.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. How are they doing this? Right. Because one of the critical points, and I don't, where does the data go first? where does it initiate from? Does it initiate from the receiving process and the procurement process in the AMDB, and then it gets validated when it gets discovered and gets online? Do we wait till it gets discovered, right? What are those challenges? Because the other side of that coin, where I was going with, what does the organization need? I've been in a place where there were no desktop endpoint devices in the CMDB. It was solely based on operational, what was making the business run, right? That was the critical piece for the organization. So how that gets defined, that's the due diligence. That's sitting down with the organization and understanding what they really want to do with it.
Now, that's a good point, Patrick. If I can hook into that, as the, trying to figure out where to start, and you've got all of these different data sources, I have seen a lot of sins happen. I end up, when I come into an organization, have to clean up a whole lot of messy data because organizations started with the CI relationships first instead of focusing in on the asset records first. And I think the reason why that ends up causing a problem is because the relations are so ephemeral and they can change so quickly in large environments. They never get to the point that they can say, we've got our arms around the entire environment. And what's your experience with that?
Well, I think that, from the discovery side of the business, right? When it comes in that way, I think there's other things that you have to take in consideration. One of those is, do we actually, for me, I think that becomes an info security risk perspective, right? If we're just throwing stuff into our AMDB, or into the CMDB rather, and then going back to the AMDB, we might be finding stuff that is a risk to us. I hate to say this, but has a hacker hit the building, right? Yep. Did we happen to come across a device that we don't even own? So, there's a lot that we have to understand about this, and it's building that core relationship, I think, with those stakeholder partners. How does info security figure out about this? Info security has always been there. It's the last really 10 years, 12 years where it really has jumped on board, but it wasn't something as an early asset manager that I ever considered. Yeah. Right. So when that CMDB comes to play, you have to measure that.
Yeah. Dude, and I see a few comments coming in as well. So let me chime in on some of this. We got Robert putting in there, AMDB is ordering. Additional part of the record is anticipated receivables. Absolutely, we look at that. Rennie actually had a comment that for her organization, they look at advanced shipping notice.
Yeah, that's perfect. Absolutely. If you get one. A lot of companies don't have that.
No, and I tell you, Rennie, that or Deanna, that is a issue with asset management not demanding that record.
Exactly.
You should always get pre-shipping information, because that bill of lading doesn't just set you up to allow you to prime your pump, so to speak. Yeah. In Patrick's view of the process management that has to happen, but that also sets you up for your definition of your inventory. Exactly. I can tell you, I only, in the 30 years that I've been doing this, I have only had one client that had a proper intake inventory system where they grabbed the bills of lading and they captured who signed off on them and confirmed, yes, they are there.
Yeah. Because the bill of lading becomes a manifest when the equipment arrives at the dock. Exactly. And that's the step that people aren't, and you need that to dispose.
Yep. Okay. 2, yep. And then 3, nobody in their right mind in this day and age should pay the PO for hardware unless it shows up.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Duh. But you would be surprised on how many finance departments will just rubber stamp your PO and then create all this extra work when something doesn't get delivered or is lost or damaged in transit.
So let me throw this little nugget up here from Robert, right? Because he's absolutely dead on. This is typical where the problem happens, right? The CI is created just from discovery. right? And that's exactly what we're talking about. It's like we need it before that, right? That's the AMDB CMDB how we come together, because he nailed it.
Well,
we can't do it via discovery, right? Yeah.
You can't.
But and I'll stop talking and let Deanna and Patrick have a chance to come into it. You say you can't do that, but then you have ServiceNow that insists a CI and an asset record have to be created at the same time.
Yeah.
And so what's the point?
Well, actually, there is a way to
I'm
do
going
it.
to go on mute now because I'm just
Don't you dare. You know, I think that that advanced ship notice is critical, right? Because it sets the table for us. The receiving process is going to verify what they said they sent to us, because those two have to match, because if not, we have other issues. One is support, right? Because if they send us one serial number and we got another one, when something has to be fixed, if we're buying extended support or whatever the case may be, it throws all of that stuff off. That's a whole nother element of surprise, right? But having that at ship notice, Jeremy, you're absolutely correct when you talk about the organizations not having it. I don't know if I've walked in an organization in the last 15 years that's had an advanced ship notice. And then the other
on a
part,
regular basis.
yeah, and the payment piece, that's another one.
Yep.
One of the first things that I always look at is trying to build that relationship between accounts payable and finance.
Yeah.
Right. Because what are you paying the bills on? You've got to validate.
Every time I talk to Don Chamley, he saes, don't forget about the three-way match. That's just shout out to Don.
So when you have then so can we pivot just a second? Because I think I'm seeing a whole lot of people that are actually encouraging me, and I'm gonna like Hulk out and
And that's different.
Let's consider this. Is that asset CI relationship a help or a hindrance when you are doing just-in-time inventory? And if you have a distributed or direct to end user delivery methodology. And what I mean by that is traditionally we think of centralized ingestion. There's somebody at the dock and it goes into a warehouse and it sits there while we get it configured. Well, now watch out. We give the end user, when they get onboarded or offboarded, a credit card number or a link that goes to the preferred vendor and says, just order what you think you need. How do you know that that ends up going? Well, if you wait until it gets delivered, then you're going to see a CI come in when it first logs in and gets registered in Active Directory and Tune. If you don't, if you're waiting for that advanced shipping notice, it might not show up for another day or two after that. So discuss.
Well, to your point, for me, when I think about how the whole procurement process works, right? So you need to know your catalog items, and I still struggle with the P cards being part of this equation unless you're doing it for emergency reasons.
That's a whole other discussion. Don't do it.
I agree. So let's table that part. That can be tomorrow. Let's table that part. But when you start doing the receiving, right, and you actually have that asset, I say that the receiving process is when it becomes a CI. Because at that point, you know, with staging, you can actually stage it with your service management folks. At least that's how I'm thinking about it, right? Intelligently. Now, I'm not saying all the technology works like that, but that's just how I look at it from a process, and that's how my brain thinks.
It's building in-house, right? If you're bringing the inventory into your building and building from there, when they start building that device, it should be picked up by Discovery at that point.
Correct.
Not necessarily. Sometimes if you are still doing on-site configuration, those warehouses might be on a separate IP or protected segment.
Yeah.
But that data, though, is still useful. It might not be relevant enough to create a CI, but it's relevant enough to tell you, hey, somebody's touching that machine at the warehouse getting it configured.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's something else that we haven't talked about. And I think somebody said Jeremy needs to shut up, and we need to go back into talking about asset versus CI database.
Oh, you're good.
But
This is part of it. This is critical.
there is a whole host of metadata that floats up above the actual records that people don't pay much attention to. And it's that metadata that we can start to leverage to automate the asset lifecycle and such. For example, if you've got an asset record because it's been ordered, but you don't have a CI because it's not coming in, it's not getting an IP address, where is it? It's got to be somewhere in between being deployed and being received. That tells you something. Or they sit on the shelf. Yeah, thank you, Rennie, for that one. Yes.
Yeah.
Or they sit on shelves for months and months. Again, that metadata is what's telling us what's really going on, not the stuff that's getting bounced around back and forth from an asset record.
Sits on the shelf. That way it just keeps the cleaning team so they have it employed too. Come on, that's all there is. Keep going.
All right, okay. Here's where I go on mute because Bill, you're well aware of the whole thing that I was dealing with existing inventory and all of that other stuff. Yeah, I gotta go on my right. So Jeremy, I'm gonna go Jeremy right here on mute for a second.
I'm the one that opened the kimono, so keep going.
So I think there's something that I just had this thought. You guys saw me writing down. What has become very evident, not only in this conversation, but all the previous conversations, all of the early kitchen pieces. And this, I don't want to derail this conversation, but we as asset management professionals think on a completely different level than just about everybody else in the organization.
Yes.
Leadership included, because how many things have we just touched on just in the receiving and the asset, the CI process?
Oh yeah. Yep.
There, when I think strategically about asset management, this is the kind of stuff that I think about. And I don't know if everybody understands what we're thinking. And this is another topic. I don't want to derail this, but going back to this whole piece, the layer of if the vendor stages it, builds it, and ships it for us, right? Jeremy, to your point, mm-hmm. Right? With agent discovery or discovery agents being loaded now, right? It changes this dynamic and it changes how this is going to happen. And it puts even more criticality on that advanced shipping notice to make sure those are accurate.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Now I'm talking too much.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that is what our contemporaries are starting to hit on. And I'm going to call in Rennie again, because I think her observation at the last ITAM summit was really, really critical. Asset managers are also moving away from the physicality. We are moving more and more into data management and the data analytics side, right? What'd you call it? Technology, asset, data analytics. Ta-da! Got to give her credit for that. If we are not touching hardware as much as we used to, then we've got to start learning how to deal with this data that we are collecting and generating and normalizing, and get that into a narrative that tells the story that, like you are saying, Patrick, needs to be told.
Deanna, were you trying to say something?
Well, notice that they're bringing up states. And that's one of the difficulties at one company. They were using the CMDB to move their hardware around. And I said, but you should be using the asset management table. None of my techs should be working in the CMDB. Now, if there needs to be a change, of course, change management may come along, do all their due diligence, make changes to the CMDB. But to run your hardware out of the CMDB, that was going to take a major lift because they had ITAM doing it instead of ITAM. And ITAM didn't care. Again, the fox guarding the hen house scenario. Asset management, if they don't give us a chance to go in there and count what you're actually doing, or ITAM considers it a different department and it's not allowed there, there's a major breakdown because the whole culture has to change. They now have to learn how to use the asset table, learn the different states, not the states they're used to on the CMDB. And I found that very frustrating because they wanted it fixed, but no one wanted to fix it. I think that's a big point.
Now that's interesting, Deanna. Let's take that an extra step further. That is very similar to an issue that a client of mine had. They had outsourced, not offshore, but outsourced their disposal activity. So as soon as the order came out from a site manager, the dross man came out, grabbed all the equipment that was in the cage, took it back to their facility, and then reported back through the CMDB what it was, where it was at, and then whether or not there was any value left or what their rating was on the device for either reuse or disposal. But that started dumping into the CMDB. And that's where I started to say, hey, what really needs to happen is it's a different relationship.
Yes.
But whatever they're doing needs to come back to the asset record. What are your thoughts on that when you divorce that end of life activity of the asset life cycle?
I think one of the major breakdowns is if your governance do not understand these things at this level, your policies will not be in place. And if they don't know to have a policy that represents this area, there will not be a policy there. And a lot of people, when they start their little departments with no governance, will make their own procedures because they assume the process must go this way. And if there's no policy saying you're not allowed to do that, then there's no policy is your baseline, how the company supports itself by telling you what you are not allowed to do. And that's very important. That's why people just go off willy-nilly. Oh, I can do this. Yeah.
Deanna, do you think that is an issue because people think in linear, that they never get to the point of the disposal piece? Or is it just that disposal, recovery and disposal is actually really tough and we don't throw enough resources at solving those problems?
Exactly. Even ServiceNow, the last time I was using it, was finally moving into that direction where that you would, all the companies I did before we went to disposal, we handed them our disposal list. We handed them the serial numbers and the asset tags. And the 3 things you have to give them is also make and model. Those 3 items gives you the ability to find something physically. And those items aren't necessarily recorded in the configuration management side. Just a serial number gets put over there and maybe the make, but not necessarily the model. So without this information, I have no way of A, knowing what I have, B, when I throw it out, I can't recover anything from it. Okay. The AMDB, yes, that is linear. But if your company doesn't consider assets an asset, they're not going to put it in. Some companies only like to put their servers and their network gear, and they don't put their laptops, which move all over the place. As an asset manager, that's sitting over there and it's not going to move out of that building. I need to know where my laptops are. And without getting all of the information from the get, this is my belly of the beast. When I say that if you don't put in good data, like a dog, you can go walk your dog and you can pick up the excrement. But if you don't feed it properly, you're just going to have diarrhea and there's nothing to pick up. You need to know what you have. Hey, dog on time.
On cue. Nice. Nice. Not only do we get the cattail wipe, but we also got the dog response. Nice. What kind of kitchen are we running here?
Chinese? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that out loud.
Exactly. That's all good. Well, so here's a note. Actually, I saw from Robert Collins. Let me show this one real quick. Was there a change of custody and inventory at the disposition devices? It should never go in the CMDB. And you're absolutely right.
Yep.
And I think that's where the confusion is. It depends upon the technology.
Here we go.
But typically, retirement data does not stay, because a CI, if you look at the true definition come from ITIL, it disappears as soon as it becomes non-operational.
Yes.
Now,
however,
there's a whole set of other processes we can get into.
I would argue, though, that before the device is actually disposed, that you have that defined disposal of the certificate of disposal. If you are not in control of that device, doubly so if you have a third-party service provider that is taking care of those devices for you, then that CI needs to live up until the very end, because it's going to be the CI record that says, yes, this is not in our physical possession. It is over here in this system, and here's what they're telling us it is.
Correct. It's like we have a setting called in stock pending disposal. Mm-hmm. And when it gets picked up, we have to match what because until we get those certificates of disposal and certificates of erasure, we still own those items. We still have to, and then once we say we've disposed of them, we have to go back to our AMDB and physically turn them into being disposed, mm-hmm, and then attach the disposal or erasure record to the record. And a lot of people do not do that.
Right. The other solution to that is and I worked with a company that did this, a large communications firm, ISP Telephone, you guys know them. Mm-hmm. They constructed their disposal contract that the device was considered disposed as soon as they received the receipt of pickup. As soon as the transfer of custody went to the disposal company, that's it. It's their problem. No questions asked.
No.
Right. Now, from a data disposal piece, that was pretty awful. But what was asset management being tracked or being tasked with? And it was finding out exactly when that dross person showed up, grabbed the device, because the report had to go over to finance to say, write this hardware off.
Yep.
And they wanted to write it off within, and it was something ridiculous. I want to say 72 hours of pickup.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
No, that's
they wanted to kill it and get it off the records as quickly as possible.
You don't know how backed up your disposal company is.
I was going to say, we would all like that. We would all like a disposal company to turn around something in 72 hours. And I was really, really happy with my vendors throughout, but that's kind of a crazy SLA for me.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I would track it, you know, Deanna, to your point, right? You've got to leverage the statuses within whatever tool you're using, right? So, you know, my stuff was, you know, in inventory, pending disposal or retirement, depending, mm-hmm, you know, when you talk about this, you also have to take into consideration leased assets versus owned assets, mm-hmm, right? Critical piece to all this. But, you know, I was documenting it through the whole step, whether it was going back to the lease company or going directly into disposal. And at each step, I'm scanning bills of lading into the system. I'm documenting, you know, I hate to say this, but, you know, that you use a spreadsheet. This is when it was picked up. This was, you know, here's the asset where the bill of lading and everything has been attached to, right? Making sure that we can cross those T's. But I never, you know, it stayed in pending disposal until I got a death certificate.
Exactly.
Well, and let's bring up the recent event with Iron Mountain, if we can name names.
Oh, that okay, yes.
Is it?
No, because they weren't, if that was the one about the company did the disposal and they had a third party pick up the items and then resold them.
No, well, no, it was the driver of the truck, if I remember right,
Right.
was the one that was pulling devices off the truck, saying that they were getting to Iron Mountain for
Oh,
disposal, but then reselling them without going through the proper procedure of ensuring data wipe and such. It was basically, he was stealing from Iron Mountain, was what he was doing,
mhm.
but there was all kinds of data that was still on that
Yes.
device that he was letting fall off the back of the truck.
He didn't
In our
understand
modern day, who's responsible for that data? And we've got to be really clear about tracking who's responsible for that data. It's not as simple as just throwing it in the back of the truck.
Supposedly, the first person who originally bought the item is responsible if it hasn't been disposed of properly. And if they are found in landfills, but they can prove that their ITAD disposal company took responsibility, they, depending on what they did their erasure or not, and we put that back, it's still on the original purchaser.
I think that's too general, Deanna. If I might disagree, I think it all depends upon the language in the agreement, and you cannot presume whether or not the onerous of the data wiping, data protections has been effectively moved over. You've got to go to that underpinning document, and
you have to identify during the transfer, when that transfer happens, right? Who's got that responsibility? You have to have that type of detail in that agreement, right? Because it's a control point.
Absolutely. So that brings up a good point. We should probably also have an ITAM Kitchen on how to read your EULA.
I'm sorry. We absolutely can. That's awesome.
Maybe we should start with having a EULA in place.
Oh, that's good.
Just spitballing right here.
Yeah. I literally sat down and read the Microsoft end user licensing agreement, all 297,000 pages of it. And this was back in 2000. And in there, they said our software is not to be able to use it. And they listed 10 or 12 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't understand that in one country and we sell it to another country, we've also broken our contract.
Right.
So, one of the other things that I had, and this is kind of when I had a pickup of my hardware, whether it was a lease return or a disposal return, I always had the export out of the system that said, okay, here's the devices, here are the serial numbers. Mm-hmm. And we went through, I would do a count with whoever was picking the stuff up. And then, quite honestly, along with the bill of lading that both of us signed, I would attach those two together, because they're verifying for me that this is what they took, right? Talking about this Iron Mountain mess, right? That was eliminated, because what also I did with that spreadsheet is I would send it to my vendor, and this is exactly what you are getting today. For me, it was just one of those things I'm worried about.
Perfectly legit. I encourage and, almost bludgeoningly encourage getting clear on the specific data that is necessary to track the what I call it in my book, I forget, the successful activity of the contract. You need to know those critical fields and get that information into one of these two records.
Yes.
And that's another difference that we should probably talk about in this AMD versus CMDB. Where should some of this contract detail that you're going to be pulling in, is that a relational piece? Or is that some quanta that is specific to that device that you're going to need these particular data dates and names of vendors? Does that go on the asset record, or does that go on the CI, because that's relating back to other tables?
We had just at one company just started pulling in the contracts table, and they were going to attach the contract table to the hardware by serial number. So for reference back, But we didn't get any further than that. I got, with that, they were, oh no, the contract has to be, okay, so who's going to load the contract in? Who's going to read the contract that goes to this specific piece of, some words, like site licenses, people don't seem to be, no, this can only be used on this floor, but my laptop is on the second floor. You have to bring your laptop downstairs and use it only on the first floor. Why? It's how we bought the equipment. I mean, there's so many nuances that now we're getting into, these aren't even weeds. These are things we need to know out the gate.
And to your point, and to all your point, right? This is typical what's overlooked when they implement a system. All these details.
Yes.
Not
only
only
in the system, but also by the implementer of the system.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't trying. Yeah.
Both of those two are
implementation. So
when we say implementer, though, we're making an assumption that they know what the heck they're talking about. Right? It comes back to our expertise.
We're going to have a whole separate topic about that next week.
When ITAM tour shows up, hey folks, how you doing? You want to buy a house?
Contract
asset management system.
The tech works out of the box. Keep that in mind. There's no configuration available needed, right?
Now, who reads the original contract? Is it being read by finance? Is it being read by ITAM? Is it being read by the service by the server guy who just wants a new server? There are so many
read by
people
the ServiceNow lead.
And yes, okay, Bill, why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Because is legal allowed to get themselves off the hook by saying, send your EULAs over to ServiceNow or whatever AI you want to use?
Someone still has to read them.
You have to have your business owner, whoever owns that contract, whoever owns the agreement actually is accountable for the EULA for all intents and purposes.
That's best
Oracle, IBM, et cetera. If they own that contract, that's theirs. That's actually true ownership, right? Now, do they look at it that way? They don't. Okay, it's someone else to deal with. That software asset management has to deal with it. Now, we also know that's an anomaly. It's kind of getting off our AMDB, CMDB topic, but that actually does happen, right?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because where should this data, after you read it, where does that data go in order to calculate your software license positions, get ready for audits, set out your...
from that perspective, okay, now I see where we went several directions, sorry.
Yes, we did.
So for me...
Patrick sitting there, it's like, come on, jump in.
It always goes on the asset.
Yep.
It always goes on the asset. The asset will have a link to your configuration item, your operational item, so you see the updates, absolutely. So you have a relationship, you'll have that linkage. It'll just call ServiceNow, right? That's one of the biggest ones, right? And there's a link back to the CI. And I think ServiceNow also has, you can put the CI and tie it to the contract as well, because they had a lot of complaints on the other side. So everyone's configuring it differently. But from the fundamental part, it's actually coming from the asset and even the software license, right? And then you actually tie it to the contract. Then you can determine your position. I'll say it that way. But from the EULA perspective, I used to put those EULAs. I had one, gosh, it's how I had an extended entire contract module of Asset Center back in the day. The customer, the legal team, the contracts team says, I want to see everything that's tied to it immediately. So when I get that phone call from the vendor to renegotiate, I want to know what my software position is so I can figure out, okay, do I need to up, down, whatever? Because he wants a wheel and deal. I will wheel and deal, but I just don't have the data to work with. So it's not about whether it's on the CI or asset, but it's about how the information comes across back to what Patrick said a little bit ago, depends upon your users and how you're using the system.
Now, I agree. Patrick, why don't you jump in? You've been sitting there nice and...
I don't want to.
You've been doing awesome. Great discussion, by the way.
There's so many dots, right?
There are.
There's so many dots, and it's all going to be defined by the organization, right? Because just because what we did at organization A is not going to work at B, we're going to steal parts. I'm totally guilty of stealing stuff from every single place I've ever been, and trying to apply it. And I'm also very responsible for taking that stuff that I put in, throwing it away because it didn't work, right? So, but in this situation, where that contract sits in the relationship to the CI, I think, I always fall back to the AMDB is really the financial business side of the world. the operational CMD. Now, with the federated model, that you have to have all of those connections, right? You have to, there's the argument that the contract should be sitting in service in, I don't know if you're using the contract module in service now. There's everywhere I've always been, legal has a problem with that, but whatever the case may be, we still have to find a way to connect those contracts to those devices or applications, and then into the CI, understanding on the business side how those are applied. Those are the critical pieces for me.
Yeah, the more I hear you talk about it, and the more I think about it, I think you're right. It does, if hardware is bought under a particular contract for a particular purpose, software is bought under a EULA or a particular license agreement, that really doesn't change any. That's a static detail. And so, by my definition, that would sit on the asset record. But like you said, some organizations are federated. Some organizations have a contract database that they do not let you touch. You need to relate. And that means that's a CI. That's a good point.
Oh, absolutely. So a little plug here. So Robert was asking, okay, and this goes for everybody, how can you forward this ITAM series? I appreciate the compliment on this, Robert. That's what it's all about, going that next step. So from that standpoint, we're having connect with myself, my own profile here on LinkedIn. So you can do that. Also, the other option is to leverage our YouTube channel, which we're going to have at ITAM Kitchen. Right there on that's where everything's going to be long term, because let's say LinkedIn has its pros and cons. That's the best way to put it, but we are putting this on the channel for long term over there. So just a little plug there for that to help keep us, not to interrupt what we're doing, but to keep that moving and flowing. So thank you for that little nugget there. So we'll have that happen. And going back to our core topic here, right? The core crux and how to fix the problem is a couple things, right? I'm not trying to summarize it. We're only 44 minutes into this. This is awesome, right? Which we know we can go for hours and days. So this is the best part. We're having a blast, and everyone online is having a blast. That's the best part. I mean, it's not about rolling anybody out, but we're all collaborating in the same form. Is we have the stakeholders we have to talk to. We have the data that they need and they want. Once we know that, then we can figure out how we can solve the overall problem, whether it's AMDB or CMDB, because the AMDB, CMDB is a set of terms that we've kind of come up with. Okay. The reality is it's a technology. Everybody has different technologies. It could be FlexError, right? And FlexError may not be looking at the hardware assets, or it's very manual versus how you look at the software. And we don't even want to start on that. That can get me down a whole different tangent. You have ServiceNow, it goes down their path. You could talk about open text and the old Peregrine HP product and how they're further evolving. There's all different sorts of ways to look at this, right? You don't hear about them much, but they're actually happening in the background. Lots of good stuff happening back there as well. But as we move forward, right, and this is kind of the crux I've heard from all of this. It all depends. Back to the consulting answer, right? For example, on the contract side, we talked about, okay, what terms and conditions? One thing I've worked with this one customer is what's the standard terms and conditions we need to have in all of our contracts versus just rubber stamping. Whether it's the software, what do we need to collect to make sure we can report upon it? Because we all know how hard these contracts are to read. They don't all scan, right? You get this sort of translatable PDF that comes through and you try to translate it, put into the contract. Okay, you need to figure out what terms and conditions you actually want, whether it's the license count, et cetera. I think that's the more critical part is we need to figure out back to what we're talking about in EULA, right? What do we need to read within it, right? And Microsoft's going to be different. Oracle is going to be different than, I'll say tech or whomever, right? Yeah. And you've got to be proficient in that, whether you're doing hardware or software. It's not that you have to know all the details, but you need to know what the company requires. And legal is not going to help you to a degree. They're going to say, you tell me, because they're worried about the high level stuff. They're not worried about the granularity we are. So saying that,
they can't get the granularity right either.
Here he goes again. You know,
As you can see, we're having a blast here. Come on.
There's so much there, right? And you're talking about that detail and understanding it, right? You know, there's a level of expectation that we as asset managers, SAM people, SAM pros, whatever the case may be, that we know every single license contract that's out there.
It does.
And it's
I had
impossible.
one cross my path yesterday. Oh, we need to know all this plus do discovery plus. It's like,
You know, I worked for a company one time. We were looking for an expert in Oracle licensing. You know what we did? We hired someone from the Oracle licensing team because they were the only one who could decipher for us.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. We didn't understand. I didn't have the. I don't have the cycles to go and learn every single segment of every single thing. But understanding what's required of us and what's needed is the critical piece, so that we can navigate and try to guide the discussion. For me, you know, I'm looking at, I hate to say it, break it down. 2 processor box, 4 processor box. Did we use the right license on that server? Right?
Yeah, keep it simple.
And quite honestly, that's, you know, how many servers can we have in a farm?
Yeah.
You know, based on it. Those are the little pieces. I don't. Yeah. Jeremy, you've been there. We've all been there, right? So I think that part is critical, that we have to have the knowledge on how to guide the conversation, because there's no way that everybody knows every EULA, every license, every piece of verbiage that's in every application. Because honestly, how many applications do you have in your company right now?
3,500.
We don't even know how many applications we have in the company most of the time. How are
applications or software?
I remember. Well, yeah, there's another big.
There's another one.
So I always go. I've used this before. The rule of thumb: you can expect at least 10 to 12 licensed software per end user device.
Only 10 to 12.
Only 10 to 12. We'll go from there.
It's a 5-person. It's a 5-seat house that he's working in right there, Bill.
I can't say it.
That's, you know, and if you look at, you know, you consider licensing suites in the large organizations, and, you know, everybody's got at least 1 or 2 that are unique to their department or project. You can start to narrow things down a little bit.
You can, because that's where discovery can help.
Yeah.
Well, that's also where discovery can help. Right?
AutoCAD in the manufacturing environment. What do you know? How many versions are you looking at right there?
Oh, yeah.
Engineering is a whole different.
Yeah, engineering is a whole different
level. Oil and gas. I mean, that's a whole nother.
And now that we've got AI, going back to the old cycle count licensing scheme, that's a whole other level of craziness. We haven't been dealing with that since mainframes.
Robert, I like Robert's answer there. Hire a licensing analyst.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There you go.
Absolutely. You got to have those.
Back to Don's point, it is about that internal control and governance, right? Yeah. It is about working through that. And everyone's going to have a different flavor of it. I mean, as much as you want to say it's cookie cutter, there's cookie cutter from the high level perspective, but the granularity, it's going to be a little different for every little organization.
Well, and I would say, to take it back to this conversation about AM for the asset database versus the configuration database, you don't know until you get there.
Exactly.
It's almost, and again, and this kind of goes back to my point yesterday, who gives a flip? What you really got to worry about is, where is the data that you need? Where is it residing in the tool that you've got? And then go from there.
So you want me to throw you a curveball? Oh no, this will take us beyond today. This will go into tomorrow.
For tomorrow.
So
we haven't been on a conversation yet, Bill, that hasn't taken us beyond today.
We're very good at this. How do you identify a virtual device?
Okay.
Getting into VMware.
I'll stick my neck out there.
Go for it. I already know what my thoughts are, but go for it. Yes.
I am very consistent about this. It's an asset. Mm-hmm. The VDI is an asset.
Yes.
Yep.
Is the VDI an asset, or is it the license that's the asset?
No, the license is an asset as well, but that's a software asset, not a
virtual
Software.
hardware.
Hardware asset.
Oh, physical
Virtual
candy.
hardware asset. Because we get charged for the virtual hardware
An
asset.
IT asset, right? It's not. Well, IT assets no longer are just physical, and that's kind of the point, right?
Well,
And the only reason why I brought it up because that's also when it comes to AMDB, CMDB. Me and Scott Young, my 30-year mentor, right? God bless his soul. He and I, we just had to agree to disagree on that because he said virtual devices are just CIs. It's like it can't be. Simplicity reasons, and again, love the guy. He was great. He got me into the industry on several different fronts, right? But on that side, you have to keep it simple because if you can make it complex and say, here's what it's only a CI on the asset, here's when it becomes an asset, and you're at that level, to me, you're just adding confusion. But maybe it was just in my head and stirring things around.
Well, every time it spins up, you own an asset. Every time it spins down, you've retired an asset.
And if it happens in the same hour because it's a
30 minutes or 3
it's a load
seconds.
balancer.
What's the rule? What's the rule on the longevity of that? How long does it have to be running?
That's a good question.
Well, if it's backup, Oracle says it doesn't matter. It still needs to be licensed, even if it isn't on.
Yep, exactly. So you did, boy, way to open up that bag again, Bill.
No, I'm gonna quote myself in the book. The debate about virtual machine versus physical machines, it's just like the old Chinese cosmology. It's turtles all the way down, and it's impolite to ask me beyond that.
Yeah, I'm looking at Robert's comment here about convince me that it's virtuals. I think convince me that virtuals aren't CIs. I don't think that we're arguing. I think they're. I think they're a CI. I think that's an automatic.
Yes.
Right.
They're automatically a CI. I will not say otherwise.
So
but they are an asset.
Right. Oh, without question. Yeah. So they are both. Right. The challenge again is how long does it have to be there? People are going to be spinning. In my previous environments, they spin them up at lunchtime and they're gone by 2. How do you manage that dynamic piece of those?
I think this is part of the technology that we've not conquered, getting our arms around because everyone says it's too hard. That's just my thought.
Is it technology or is it governance? That's the issue. To be able to say, because again, Patrick, when you think about those servers that are spinning up and spinning down, does that really happen in a production environment, or is that in the test or backup environments that these things are going on? Because the licensing rules could be completely different for your non-prod environments.
Yes, they can be.
So I'm gonna add another layer of complexity to this.
Go for it.
Okay. What the heck? We're rolling with this. When they spin them up, how are they notifying us? And do we ever know if they've spun up? Because if they spin something up outside of the discovery schedule, we'll never know about it.
So if a turtle falls in the forest,
hold on, too many people.
So if a turtle falls in the forest, does it even exist?
Tree fall sound. Yep,
that's right. Yes, no, that's actually a very good point. That's a very good point. I'm not going to answer that.
But welcome to cloud environments. Because we don't know. It's all about, it's not that they're trying to restrict it, but honestly, they didn't realize we were even part of the picture.
Good point.
And how expensive can it get if you turn a bunch of developers into AWS?
We'll talk about millions or billions, depending on what the bill is.
Yeah.
That goes back to
solving the problem.
Yeah.
Ours, keep the utility high, total cost of ownership low.
Which is why FinOps was created.
Okay, that's another fight.
I'm going on mute.
Well, it was for that purpose, but
that's
a whole separate topic. Yeah. But the whole idea there was they were tired of paying the bills when they went cloud. And I actually happened during the pandemic, actually just before the pandemic. They were paying bills, and the executives like, why do I have this bill? This makes no sense. You left the server on. Why does it cost me $100K for this month for this one instance? And that's minor compared to bills they were getting. And that's why you started going down path. But FinOps is a totally different discussion. But that's also the whole idea there was to help alleviate that or make it better and easier to manage. I mean, I'd love to have a whole FinOps discussion because I'm with someone who's passionate about it on that part. Because just to be educated without being skewed, it's all good. But as we come up, we're in the final 3 minutes here. As predicted,
We'll have another show.
the discussion continues. We're going to continue on tomorrow, which is awesome. And I really, really, really appreciate this. Hey, if you know of someone within your network of folks, et cetera, the event's already out there for tomorrow. So I already have it posted. You're going to see events. I'm going to go ahead and start posting for the next week. If you want to be on here and you have a topic, and there's a few of you have already started doing that, reach out to me. We'll make sure you're on the calendar as well. I'm having a blast. As you can tell, we're all having a blast because this is what we openly are passionate about. And these are the topics that I just don't want to hear noise. I want to hear topics that are relevant, right? And we're getting a lot of great knowledge from the industry folks in general, all sorts of different parts, and also different parts of the world, which is great. But as we look at the ITAM Kitchen, that's what this is all about. It's about that collaboration. How can we figure out, are we going to solve world hunger? No, but we can try. We can try, right? But how can we better manage and understand some of the complexities involved? That's what we're talking about. And I'm not talking about the lower level stuff. I'm talking about the higher.
Yeah,
so that's my comments. Jeremy, kind of we're wrapping up today. We'll do a round robin here. Any final thoughts for today?
You put me on the spot, and all of a sudden my brain just like shut down. No, it is. Actually, I'm going to steal from Patrick. So sorry, pal. But what he said is actually very true. You have to be the smarter person about this debate because you're not going to get to choose. Is it asset management or is it configuration management? You've got to figure out in a hurry as the ITAM professional, what's this tool do? How does it handle the data? Where's your data coming from? And then how do you go through the process of making that as green and useful for your reporting as possible?
Excellent. Patrick?
I'm going to build on that one and not the fact about Pat being smart on this one. No, but seriously, it's also about being the voice of reason and being able to handle the conversation and lead the conversation to get to a point where everybody is comfortable with what that path is going to be, right? Because it dovetails back to governance. It dovetails back to policy and procedures, right? When you start talking about this being that voice of reason, you have to say, hey, you know what? If you want to then be able to spin this stuff up at any given moment, this is where the risk is with this, right? If you're going to do that, to mitigate risk, we might have to make an additional purchase of additional licenses just to accommodate that. But we have to understand what comes with that. Because if we start spinning these things up, Jeremy, you mentioned Oracle, right? If you spin it, that executable sitting there, you got to have it licensed, plain and simple. So, being the voice of reason and being that conduit between the technical, the business, senior leadership. That's how I broke into this business, and that's how I'm going to stay in this business because I'm not technical. So I've got to be something in it. So that's all I got. I'm not coming to anything on a Saturday, Bill.
Neither am I. You're good. Indiana?
I like to build on what Patrick said about being the voice of reason. Where we go, we have no idea what we're going to find, but we do know the boilerplate. We know what a perfect place looks like. How do we get you there? And if without communication, depending on how your company is, I won this and I've been here for 20 years, so I'm going to win the next one, doesn't matter what you're going to say. Things like that need to be worked out through departments for the betterment of the company, not the betterment of, I want this. And I was kind of shocked to see how much of that is still in industry. I'm done.
You sure? It was that. This is awesome, and I really appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the contributions. We'll continue on tomorrow. For anyone who hasn't signed up for tomorrow, it's on the event on LinkedIn, or you can go on the YouTube channel. So it'll be both out there. It'll be 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll continue the dialogue tomorrow. It's intended for the wrap up. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Everybody have a great day.